Hi, everybody. So we're here to talk about BBC's Hidden Kingdom today. Thanks for coming down this morning. I know we're running a few minutes late, but there's quite a lot of content to go through, so we're going to get going pretty much straight out of the block, I think. So yeah, I mean, feel free to introduce yourself, guys.
Hello, my name's Mark Brownlow. I was the series producer of Hidden Kingdoms, the television series, and during the 2-year production period, we also made a one-off 40-minuter for TV and giant screen for Hidden Kingdoms. So the giant screen is called Tiny Giants, and the TV one-off is called Hidden Kingdoms. I produced and directed that one-off with the help of the legend of 3D himself, Phil Streather.
No, not. Well, I am a producer, but I was not the producer of this film. I have produced things like ages ago, a film called Bugs in IMAX 3D. My other favourite directors in the house today, Julian Napier. I did the London Eye film with Julian, and Carmen in 3D, Madame Butterfly 3D. But I was asked a couple of years ago to help out the BBC with their move into giant screen, and I did that for a year. And at the same time, I was asked to help with the Hidden Kingdoms 3D project, and I am the stereo supervisor of that project, and that's why I'm here today.
Well, you want to
yes, I'll just give you a very brief overview of what Hidden Kingdoms is about. I don't know, you may be familiar with the TV series. It's this specific one-off follows two parallel stories. It's a journey into a world we don't normally see. It's beneath our feet, and it's a world where we meet tiny little superheroes. We follow the antics of a young chipmunk who is facing his winter, and he has to gather enough nuts or acorns in time for the onset of winter. And we intercut that with a parallel storyline of this extraordinary little mouse, scorpion mouse, in the wild west of America. He's no ordinary mouse. He's cute and endearing, but he's also a voracious predator. He's immune to venom. He even stands on his hind legs and howls. I mean, he's an extraordinary character. So I thought the first thing we should do is just play you a little clip from the chipmunk, just to sort of tee up what the style of the film.
Well, I'm not going to destroy the furniture, but I think I've seen this one put down before now. There we go. Can I just make a couple of really boring technical points quickly? This projector, for whatever reason, at a fantastic summit, looks like it's about 10 pixels out of vertical alignment. So if anybody's looking at the 3D and saying, oh gosh, that all looks a little bit vertically misaligned, on-site must be rubbish. On-site are brilliant, that's where we're doing all our post. That's the first thing, so sorry about the projection being a bit out. And the second thing is, these shots have all come from the film after we finished the TV version, but before we have finished the giant screen version. So we are back at on-site now, halfway through the process of digitally remastering the images. Most of it's shot at 4K or above, some mixed formats that Mark and I'll talk about in a minute. But we're putting every frame through a very expensive digital remastering process. So shots that you saw there that might have been a bit noisy, like the acorn dropping on the snail, and a couple of the other shots, that's what we're removing now at a bargain basement price at on-site.
So how did you guys get so close to the action?
Well, first off, I just wanted to explain why we're doing this in 3D. The whole thing about our whole aim was to try and take people on a journey to this other world. It's a bit of a kind of Alice in the Wonderland moment when you go down the rabbit hole and you enter this whole new world. And we felt that 3D could provide that extra immersive experience to really make you wonder at this extraordinary world where the laws of physics are completely different to our world. These little creatures live their lives in different time scale. As you saw there, an acorn is like a meteor. So we thought the 3D could really enhance that experience. The other key thing to say is that the whole approach to this film, as was the series, is to give the experience of what it was like to be 6 inches tall. So we wanted the audience to experience all the trials and tribulations and challenges of being miniature. And that then was the big challenge for filming. For 2D, very talented directors Simon and Verity were here. They did an incredible job in 2D achieving that. But in 3D, we had this sort of extra challenge. How do we do that? And so when your first question is how do we get so close? Because we're shooting, we were already shooting wide-angle with straight scopes for the TV series. So our big challenge was to how do we get these massive 3D rigs low enough to the ground and close enough to the subject. And to answer your question, maybe we should play the next clip.
Yes. Well, in fact, there's other people here as well. So you'll see a guy, I think in this clip, Jonathan Jones. Jip Jones is here, who was the DOP of a whole lot of it. And, of course, it was brilliantly production managed by Linda Dale, ladies and gentlemen, who's in the house. And production coordinated by Jenny Fuchs and Daniel Sykes. Everyone's here today. In fact, most of the audience is made up of the Hidden Kingdoms 3D team.
And on site.
We'll name all by the end.
So we'll show you a bit of clip of behind the scenes of how we went about filming the chipmunks. The 3D filming was a natural progression of our 2D filming style of getting low and close to the subject. And you can't do that with any animal. Most wildlife is shot on the end of a long lens. So we had to be very careful what subjects we chose, and chipmunks were a gift. But you can't film any old chipmunk. This is a very special place where scientists have been studying this particular group of chipmunks for over 20 years. And they're effectively habituated, so they allowed us to approach them and were comfortable with our presence and just got on with their daily business.
So some of this equipment's quite heavy duty. So what were some of the specific challenges of actually shooting such a small world with those massive rigs?
Well, as you saw, we had to dig holes, which meant that every day you were locked into one position, because the amount of time it took just to get it rigged up and ready before then filming meant that you just couldn't do anything else that day. So moving the camera around was a challenge, and you just had to sort of milk as much as you could out of each given day scenario and hope that wherever you put your camera, you get good action. I mean,
they're not actually the biggest rigs that there are. I mean, that's in some ways one of the smaller packages. That's the P&S Freestyle rig with a couple of Epic cameras and the zoom lenses on. It's the same system that I used on a film about meerkats, and it's quite possible. Yes, you can dig holes, but you have to dig holes and lock your camera down if you're shooting in 2D. That rig is actually quite possible. So we chased meerkats, kilometers a day. In order to go with them foraging using exactly the same rig. So it is big-ish, but two people can very easily carry it. And that's a sort of very standard package. That's the sort of package that people would shoot dramas on. But chipmunks are relatively big. I mean, they're about that big, with the tail about that big. So you can get, if your camera's front of the mirror box is here, you can get your chipmunk about there and get a really nice shot. So on one level we were using, and we'll show you some other toys later, but the next sequence is used largely with the same system. It's a regular off-the-shelf 3D gear that was masterfully used by Jip and Mark in the field. And
we were on relatively tight budgets, so we had to be very efficient with every filming day, and we can only afford sort of the downtime of 1 or half a day to change over our lens systems. So halfway through the shoot, we made a decision to move away from the Epics and onto a much higher speed camera. What we were finding is that the chipmunks, they just live their lives at breakneck speeds. I mean, they're just so quick. And we really wanted to show the detail of their behavior and how they live their lives. And although we were pushing frame rates up to 75 and even up to 125 frames, we were having gen lock issues where the two images weren't locking together. So we made a big call to swap over to the high-speed Maro camera, Phantom Maro cameras, which you can shoot up to 2,000 frames a second. They're far more temperamental than the Epics, so they were really tricky to use in the field. But we think we captured some unique behavior using this setup. So perhaps we can show the next clip.
Yeah.
You're probably beginning to you're probably beginning to realise by now that Mark hasn't created any ordinary natural history film.
Yep. Well, that's what I was going to ask. Because I mean, because obviously you're creating a dramatized version of reality here. So why did you choose slow motion to tell this narrative?
Well, Slow motion, we said earlier, was about revealing detail of these little creatures' lives that you just can't see with the naked eye or even at 75 frames a second. And the point being that when you do go down into their worlds, they do live in a completely different timescale to us. In terms of sort of dramatization, I think that we can discuss that more perhaps when talking about the other character, the scorpion mouse. The scorpion mouse story, we follow this youngster. He leaves the safety of his tin can burrow, and we follow his first steps out into a very dangerous world. So maybe we should just play the clip of one of the perhaps most dramatic sequences in his story when he runs into a rattlesnake, and then we can talk a bit about the dramatization.
Sure.
So we can play the next clip, please.
So can you just talk through some of the actual narrative choices you were making during that?
Well, as you can see quickly, I mean, as you all can tell, this is a departure from Enchanted Kingdom or other more blue chip approaches to wildlife filmmaking. We felt that by going into the world of these miniature creatures, where they do live their lives on an accelerated pace. I mean, these mice, if they're lucky, 1 in 300 of these mice will make it to old age, which is 1 year old. So, and every day their lives are inherently far more dramatic than creatures of our size. So we felt that the dramatic approach reflected their actual biology. And the key point here is that everything you see is underpinned by rigorous science. So we're not making anything up. This is all real. It's just it's actually impossible to film this if you were to sit and observe. So we had to come up with all sorts of filming techniques. And with the help of BDH and Rob and Mike here today, we use a lot of compositing techniques to combine imagery to give us these unfilmable but highly dramatic moments to tell the full story of these creatures' lives.
Well, there was also, what kind of equipment were you using to try and achieve this? Because they're not the same size as chipmunks.
Right. So this is what was really interesting, was that chipmunks, we just about got away with filming with wide-angle lenses on the freestyle rig, but the mouse is a third of the size of the chipmunk, and that then crossed over a line where we could no longer use the freestyle because you just couldn't get the subject close enough to the camera. Again, we're not filming long lens here. We need to be wide and close. So physically, we couldn't get the mouse close enough to the lens. And also, the lens front element is way too big. Now, in 2D, Simon and Verity were using straight scopes, which is, it looks like a sort of machine gun barrel lens with a tiny glass front end. It's only an inch wide. So our big challenge was, how on earth do we build one of those in 3D?
Well, luckily, I knew a man. So when I made the Bugs movie about 10 years ago, that was all on film. So we built this massive, massive system weighing half a ton using 70mm film cameras, great big, massive optics. But that was built by a guy called Peter Parks, who actually is Chris Parks' dad, Chris Parks of Gravity fame. And so we went to, again, great working with the BBC because there's all sorts of little interesting forward-looking pots of cash you can access. For serious research and development. It's not wasting our money, I promise you. And so we were able to offer Peter a small amount of money to help him build and the next generation of that snorkel system, so that we, instead of using one of those barrel snorkels that Mark was talking about that we used by Jip and others, we were able to have 2 of them, a small little half-silvered mirror. So basically he built like a mini mirror rig. But it meant that the front surface of that, the front was about that size. So instead of if it was on the freestyle rig, that's where the shovel of the rig is, and that's where the lens is back there, and that's where the screen, the film plane is. The way the snorkel work is that the actual, sort of the optical image plane is really close to the subject, and plus, you can get an animal, if that's the front of the lens, you can get it right up to the front. You can get it as close as you can actually physically get to the pellicle. The downside is it's heavy. We were really hoping, we're now working on another generation of specialist optics with Peter. The hope was that this system was going to be about f5.6. It turned out to be probably more like 60, 64. But, you know, luckily they were filming in the Sonoran Desert, so the light doesn't get much brighter than a midday sun out in the Sonoran Desert. But without that gadget, I mean, particularly, we'll see it used, see what it looks like in a sec, but I always find that side shot of the snake in the sort of, when the snake is beginning to chase after the mouse, when it's going through the stones and the cacti, incredible depth of field, which makes you really contributes to the sort of feeling of being there. You don't really, one of the negatives of long lens work is the focus drop off. Your focus is in subject, but loads in front of it and loads behind it is out of focus, and that doesn't make for such a sort of satisfying 3D image. So all of those tracking shots, most of the shots that you saw there of the mouse, that was all, wouldn't have been possible with the basic mirror rig, and was only possible with those optics, but then, you know, wonderfully used on location. Actually, just on a 3D note, I was the stereo super of the film. It meant I was actively the stereographer on some shoots and did all the post and all the sort of design with Mark, but I had 5 different guys. They were all guys, didn't have to be, but they were, as location stereographers. So there was Simon de Glanville, did all the chipmunks, Matt Smith, did the mice, a guy called Paul Williams, who's currently out in Borneo. He was doing the owls in the studio, and then even 2 of the rig techs actually physically handled the 3D on location. So that was possibly my biggest job, was to make sure that with 5 different artists that we were all sort of able to sound like we were singing in the same choir.
Sure. Thanks. Good.
So we'll show a little clip just to show you the Zero rig in the flesh, in operation.
Wide-angle lenses, get close to your subject.
And it was a big piece of kit. We had lots of teething problems, as you'd expect from a prototype. It didn't like the extreme heat. It was getting over 40 degrees on most days. There was a lot of dust, and it didn't like being moved around. So as soon as you moved it, it would get knocked out of alignment. And there was a lot of sort of frustrating long days trying to just get it working. But I think when it did work, it proved invaluable for this style of filmmaking.
I don't think you'd have been able to have told the same story without it, would you? I mean, you'd have been...
No. Well, obviously for the chips, yes. But actually, even the elements of the chipmunk story, we then used...
Back in the studio.
Back in the studio, Zero rig with.
Cool. Well, I know we're sort of coming towards the end, so I just kind of was going to ask, where do you think the future of 3D natural history is, the vision's going at this point?
Well, the BBC are culling their 3D output for the television side of things, but BBC Earth, where they make the giant screen projects, they're growing an appetite. Obviously, Sky, I think you'll hear from Sky later. I think they're obviously spearheading natural history for television. So it's, I mean, Phil, you probably know better than me.
Well, I mean, we're really most interested in the giant screen area of life. It's very active in, there's no resistance on the door there. All films for giant screens are 3D. Audiences love it. They like a lot of 3D. I personally like putting a lot of 3D in my films. I'm a sort of Phil McNally acolyte. I think there's no point in going to see a 3D film if it's so subtle that if you take your glasses off, you can hardly tell the difference. I think that what's interesting in terms of natural history is, and I'll be fascinated to see how something like Enchanted Kingdom does, which is more classic blue chip, is that certainly in North America, their relationship with the BBC is actually finished. And there's a slight disconnect between the type of natural history that we seem to like in the UK, which is pretty blue chip, like Frozen Planet, Africa. North America is wanting more story, either coming from the interaction of animals and humans, or much more of a narrative within the films themselves. And I think that's where Mark's pushed his film, our film, is a story. And when people say, oh, what's the story? It's about a character. There are 2 characters, and these characters face problems, and they have journeys, and they have goals, and they have resolutions at the end. And along the way, you learn some fascinating stuff about rattlesnakes and chipmunks and mice. So I think that's a really interesting way to go. It's certainly the way that Mark and I are going, is to put a lot more real story in terms of character in our stories. Whether anyone else is going to go in that direction or not. OSF, are you going to go in that direction now? What are you going to do?
Well, what we perhaps could do is just show you our last clip, which is a summation of all the techniques that we've used. It was brilliantly cut by our editor, Jimmy Taggart, in the audience. and assisted by Tom Wright. And perhaps we take some questions after that.
Yep. I grew up in Arizona, so I've seen those monsoons. It can be like that for people as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But I guess we're going to take some questions now. Just a quick note, if you're going to ask something, could you just wait for someone to pass you a microphone? I've been told to say. So yeah, one here.
Hi, Mark, guys. I was just going to ask, do you think that natural history filmmaking, the way that it's going, is you're going to have to more and more construct realities, build sets, use the composite shots you were talking about, or do you think the technology is going to allow you to do that less often, to tell the stories you want to tell?
If you talk about in the context of television output, the Natural History Unit produces a huge plethora of filmmaking programs, from classic wildlife series that everyone knows and loves, like Life. The Life Stories is being released this autumn. So they've got children's, they've got live OBs. There's a huge smorgasbord of natural history films and this is just one part of that big picture. So that the appetite for blue chip is as strong as ever, but we wanted to tell a different story about little creatures, and you cannot. Well, you could do a David Attenborough Life in the Undergrowth again, but we felt that we wanted to try something different, push boundaries, appeal to a different part of the audience. What we found is that the average viewer, age of the viewer, this is extraordinary for BBC One, for blue chip like Africa, was 55. And what we wanted to do was draw in a different audience. So we may have, Hidden Kingdoms may have pushed out the older audience, but people went absolutely crazy about it on Twitter, saying they've never seen anything quite like it. They loved it. And we tapped into a whole new audience. In terms of giant screen, it's geared to the family anyway, and our remit was always, this is Pixar meets life, and I think there's probably going to be an appetite for more, because it seems to tick those boxes both on the giant screen and for television.
A lot of it depends on the size of the animal as well. So if you're going to make an insect film, I want to make a film about bumblebees, I'll have to do it very similar to that. A lot of reconstruction, a lot of sets. But then I want to make a film about beavers, and then there'll be a lot of moose and coyotes and other animals that you'll do a mixture of classic blue chip hides, getting close, because the animals are bigger, so you don't have to get so close. So it'd be a hybrid.
Yeah, thanks. It looked great. It was fantastic. I mean, I particularly like the sort of James Bond chipmunk fight sequence. I mean, and, the music was clearly aping Bond, so it was kind of, it's clear that was your intention. But I think it's quite interesting what you're saying about this. You're kind of looking for the Twitter audience, younger audiences, and so on. But do you feel there's a point at which you're kind of, maybe the fiction is overtaking the fact? I mean, I can see where you're sort of, what you're trying to do, and it looks very engaging, and I would like to see the show for sure. But, is there some sort of lines that get sort of blurred? I mean, do you need to sort of say at the beginning, this is a dramatic reconstruction? Do you know what I mean? It's like,
do you work for the Telegraph?
I was just about to say.
No, okay. Look,
come and watch the film and then have the discussion.
We've been through all this with the press when the 2D series came out, and you're absolutely right. In some ways, it has to be very clearly signposted up front what you're watching as an audience, because if the audience gets confused, they think they're going to watch Africa, and they're watching this and they're getting constructed drama. They could get confused. So the key is clarity in signposting, that they know this is a reconstruction of what happens in the wild. And as always, with anything from the BBC, it's factually true. So you can feel comfortable that what you're seeing there it is based on science. And
I think you only need that signposting for the BBC. For the giant screen commercial audience, I don't think you would really need that level of signposting. But also, I think when you watch the whole film, Yes, I think it does move things forward. I don't think it crosses it may cross a line, but I don't think it crosses a Rubicon. So I don't think it's somehow being deceitful. All the science is in there. There's a lot of interesting little factoids thrown in. The idea is, particularly in giant screen, is to engage. Most giant screens are in museums and places of lifelong learning, and the object of those films is to engage younger people and families with the natural world, to help them learn to love it and therefore learn to protect it. So that's what its job is, to do that, and it should do it in any which way that it possibly can.
Any other questions? I'm not missing anybody, am I? No. Okay, cool. I think that's it. So yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming down.
Thanks very much.